Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Angry Chicken. I'm your host, Garrett Weinzierl, and with me are many other hosts today. We've got Willie Dills, we've got Jocelyn Moffat, and joining us for the first time is a very special guest today, ThatsAdmirable. Welcome to the show, man.
Howdy, happy to be here. It's been a while since I spoke to Willie Dills at BlizzCon.
That's right.
And been looking forward to this. You know, I don't catch it every single week, but I do listen to it often while I'm going number 2 on the toilet. I need something else to do. But
Best place to
Good
listen.
to know that we're keeping you company.
thank you. And then, you know, after about an hour and a half of that, then I get up and have the rest of my day.
See, I told you guys, we were missing our target demo.
Yeah, so I ran into you, I think it was just at the Hilton bar, where everyone was having some cocktails and may or may not have made, the solidest of plans at that moment, but I was glad that I actually got to connect with you. You've been one of the people that has been on our short list for a long time to actually get on the show, so really excited to have you on today, and there's a lot to talk about too, so this is a good time to be on the show.
I feel like it's a great time too for a guest, right? Because there's a lot to talk about, but it's like the dust is settled. It's not like we have to oh man, guys, we got like an hour-long news reel for you today. A lot of stuff to discuss. No, we can actually kind of sit here and chew the fat for a little bit. So I guess with that in mind, why don't we just do that?
Yeah.
So we were talking. It's funny because if you're watching on stream right now, you may have seen a little bit about this in the pre-show, but we were talking about ahead of time. Dills, you were giving Nathan a hard time because we put out the tweet you're coming on, Admirable, and some of the responses were like, "Oh, I love him. Where's he been?" And it's just like, well, follow him on Twitter, and I'm sure you'll find out.
Faded from the scene.
I
believe was the direct quote from Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I'd only done 5 weeks of the collegiate event, round of 40 for America's Championships, Star Ladder, collegiate finals, PAX. Geico event, played in won the Geico tournament that was at PAX as well. I can see what he means.
Yeah,
Totally faded.
completely faded. Yeah. You played at PAX and you cast at PAX as well?
That's correct. Actually,
Jeez,
I was at PAX on Friday, and I was kind of walking around checking out stuff. A friend of mine, Luis Scott Vargas, who's like one of the most
LSV. I saw him there.
Yeah, he's one of the most winning Magic players of all time. He was actually debuting one of his new mobile games that they've been working on.
I saw that.
I'd heard about this, but I didn't really know any of the details, despite knowing a lot of people who had been working on this game. So I went over there and checked it out. I was kind of walking around, and then Monk caught me, and he was like, "Hey, we're running this Geico thing. We need like 2 more players. You should jump into it." I was like, I don't know. It seems kind of like I'm casting this weekend. He goes, "Oh, it's fine. The heats are done after the casting's done. Like I already checked everything out. It'll be totally good." And I was like, "Okay, sure, I'll play." And I just won all my matches. So that worked out pretty well.
That's the secret. Just win, and then you'll win.
It's so easy, you guys. I was actually going to play that. Was that the Saturday when you played, or was that on the Friday?
I played the heat on Friday, and then that put you into. If you won your heat, you got put into like the finals thing. Or you played like the top 4, and if you won that thing, then you got put into the finals. And that is where I was the last day. Where actually Kit Kats was there too, and one of the guys who had made the finals in the collegiate event was also in that top 3. So the top 3 players there, I was like, God dang, man! I mean, what do you come here to PAX and play this open event where only people at PAX can play? I got to play against like 3 prime players right now.
I hope they're all going to be free to play players. What's going on here?
Just like
I was actually
going
to play in the Saturday event, and then I just ended up playing Magic the entire weekend. So I was just like, there was just like so much going on. It was too much to try to do it all. But I did catch you casting the collegiate stuff, which I thought was really fun because, and we talked about it on the show briefly. It was hard to watch for a long period of time because I was at PAX and I was standing. But I was like, the broadcast should be really cool because there was so much time on every turn because it was 3 players. So they were like all talking through every turn. And then as casters, you guys were able to talk through every turn quite deeply. And I was really interested in that. Unfortunately, of course, I was standing on the floor and I was like, I just don't want to stand here in front of this Twitch screen anymore. But it was really, really interesting event.
Spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, we talked about it on the show, right?
Yeah. Because we were lamenting how much concrete just sucks to stand on for long periods of time.
Because you guys had just casted the taco event where everyone was like flying through every turn, and you're like, and he's okay. Well, I want to talk about that, but that turn's over.
It's like, well, they're both playing incredibly aggressive, and they have wonderful draws. Okay, these turns are going to be over in 10 seconds each. Great.
See, I prefer that kind of Hearthstone where it's like super blazing fast. Like I would love for them to introduce the blitz mode in Hearthstone because then you could actually have a play-by-play caster in Hearthstone to kind of like simplify it all. And I feel like that's actually where I fit better. Like I feel like I do okay analysis, but I kind of tend to go like way deep down the rabbit hole. Like, do you remember that Grantland article, too far down the rabbit hole with Nicki Minaj? She's like standing there with a bunch of kids, and hands are just all over the place. You're like, whose hands are these? And this guy goes on like a 14-page diagram where he draws it all out. That's kind of what I end up doing with Hearthstone tournaments sometimes. And I catch myself, I'm like, no one's even listening anymore because I've gone way too deep. I have to stop. So I actually.
Well, if that's the case, do you have like a favorite person to cast with that kind of plays off your style, so you can do play-by-play and they can do the analysis? And so it seems like that would be the pairing then, right?
Well, I feel like Hearthstone casts are just so much different than, like, say you're watching Here's the Storm, Counter-Strike, whatever it's going to be. Mm-hmm. Hearthstone feels like it should be a lot more conversational and a lot less presentational, if that makes sense. So because of that, you just need to be with somebody that you can talk to and that like will understand the cultural references you're going to make, be able to bounce back off of jokes, like understand what your vocal inflection actually means. Like if you're trying to be serious, you're trying to make a joke, or say you're trying to do like a little bit of sarcastic seriousness and they're supposed to play off that. Mm-hmm. It really requires someone who has a great intuition of who you are as a person. And so that's why you see a lot of the casting duos who are so good. They're just people that know each other really well, rather than people who I think are very good at doing Hearthstone broadcasts. And that's what creates sometimes these really awkward pairings, is when you get two people who are very good at talking by themselves, but they don't really know each other at all. And so how can you have a conversation with someone you don't really know? There's like that kind of like really awkward getting to know each other phase that you guys seem to go through the entire broadcast. And that was what I felt like made my cast with Tannen so good, like say on HPL, for instance. Whenever we had time to talk about whatever we wanted to talk about, and we could just have a conversation, it felt really good. That's because Tannen and I have known each other for like 15 years. And then other broadcasts have done really well is like with Artosis, for instance. I met him at Fight Night 2 years ago, and we became pretty good friends after that. And so every cast we did afterwards felt really natural and felt very conversational. And to me, that's what really creates a broadcast, not necessarily people, I think, who can do great presentations just by themselves.
So do you think that might actually kind of cause a problem for what they're doing with Hearthstone casting right now for the World Championships? Because they're kind of like searching for new talent and bringing in new people. And I know watching the preliminaries, the EU ones that happened this past weekend, there were some points where you're just like, well, that was awkward. Like, not because they're bad casters, but you're just kind of like, okay, guys, like make your point, move it along. Do you think that they're going to have some issues bringing in new talent?
Yeah, I mean, well, every time you bring in new talent, you're always going to have some sort of road bump to get over. And that's where I feel like the broadcasting backgrounds really help. Like, for instance, I know they got Cora for the actual championship, I believe it was. And everyone that I knew was kind of like, who is this person? I've never even heard of this person. It's like, apparently she has an actual journalism background.
Yep.
And TJ, for instance, he has a journalism background as well. And he seems to mesh with everybody that I've met. And the very first time I met and had a cast with TJ, it felt very conversational. I was like, wow, journalism background actually really matters about this because they understand like what the presentation is. So yes and no. You're already going to have some road humps, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be a problem. I think you just need to give those people time with each other and like let them walk around the city and like have dinner together and just relax and play games or whatever it's going to be, just to become familiar with each other. I think that's probably the most important part of the cast.
It's something I haven't even really thought about recently because I've been so involved in watching Hearthstone esports so regularly. But now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, it is strange to me we have a lot of casters and a lot of people that are casting with each other. We don't really have a casting duo that we see regularly together. Where when I came from watching StarCraft as like the first esport I ever got into, it was all about Tasteless and Artosis. And it felt like if they weren't around, it wasn't a big to-do tournament.
Yeah, so to me, that's what made them so good, is during that dead time at the beginning where you're just watching drones.
Yeah, you're listening to them.
They can just talk about
They're
anything.
talking about like seeing the X-Men movie over the weekend, and you're like, yeah I like that scene too, Tasteless.
I know, and like, I'm watching it, and I'm like, I'm watching drones, and I'm entertained. This is what's happening. Yeah, this isn't the fun part of the game.
Yeah, and now I want to go. I haven't watched StarCraft in a little while, and I want to go back. Now that the beginning of the game is sped up significantly, I want to see what the casting is like.
Yeah, I haven't really been watching too much since Legacy of the Void either. I'm actually really interested in that too.
Yeah, although maybe I won't like it as much. Maybe there's not as much time to talk about whatever.
X-Men talk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Deadpool just came out this weekend. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of really interesting conversations to be had.
You can't really talk about too much of that movie on public channels.
Yeah, you can't.
No, let's talk about it. Let's go.
It was
really
good.
Let's talk about how you got involved in the Hearthstone scene, Admirable, because at the beginning, there's a lot of names I don't think were familiar to a lot of people, and we kind of ended up with this core. But everyone has their story of kind of how they discovered the game. Were you always a card player, and then this kind of, I know you have a poker background as well. Was this just like this game just grabbed you from the beginning, and you just said, I'm getting involved, and that's how it worked, or what was the story there?
So I've been playing Magic now at this point for about 20 years. Since 1996 is when I started playing, and I remember from very early on, like competition was like the number one thing that drove me to play the game. I wanted to compete. I wanted to play tournaments. I wanted to be better than my friends. When I got better than my friends and they didn't really want to practice anymore, I practiced against myself. I was like very obsessive with it. So flash forward through that, we're talking like buying and selling cards was like my way to make a living for a while. I got into poker at some point and played poker full time. I made a decent amount playing Magic, but it was like local tournaments and stuff, like where they have like $1,000 cash tournaments or like a very large card for like the first prize. And I wasn't really going anywhere. I was just kind of going in circles over and over again. And like I tried my hand at like playing League of Legends professionally, and it was like super hard to break into the top end. Like being Diamond 1, like high Diamond 1 just wasn't enough because it was kind of like an old boys club at the time I was playing. And I was kind of stuck, and I was just like, man, what am I going to do? Like, maybe gaming just isn't for me. Maybe I really have just spent like the last 18 years doing nothing. And I was sitting at the card shop playing against somebody preparing for a big tournament that weekend. And this guy was just on his computer watching Twitch. And I was like, what are you watching? That looks interesting. He's like, oh, it's this game called Hearthstone. And so I just started watching him as he was watching it. And I figured out the rules just by kind of like watching the way the cards were working and like looking at the screen. I was like, this game seems kind of easy, and that guy's making a lot of mistakes. So as I was watching it, like went on for like a week. I just like sat there and I watched the game over and over and over again. Like 10 hours a day, I felt like I was watching this. And at some point, I was like, all right, I got to figure out how to get this game. And I was like, oh, it's in beta. Oh, well, there's got to be a way to just like buy a beta key or something. So I just went on eBay. There was beta keys available, so I bought one. And
so you're one of the guys that actually bought your beta key on eBay, and you didn't get scammed.
Yeah, I mean, there were tons of beta keys given out. All I did was just check their feedback. They had like 1,000+ feedback. It was good. And so then I bought beta keys for everyone at the card shop. So I gave them all beta keys, and then instead of playing Magic that weekend, we just like sat down and played Hearthstone the whole time. And the game was so enthralling. I felt like it was like the first time I played Magic. That's what the game felt like to me. And so I decided at that point, I was like, seeing people get like 15,000 viewers playing Hearthstone, and I was like, you know what? I think this is really what I want to do, and I think this is an opportunity, and because it's so early on, I need to do it right now. So I had like $1,400, and I quit my job. I was like, this is it. And I just streamed Hearthstone for like 14 hours a day. And I ended up, like, this is back when they had like the 3-star system or whatever.
Yeah, Master, Grandmaster.
Yeah, right when that rolled over into the ranks, I got Legend like the first couple days. I was in top 10, and I just kept playing while I was in top 10. I'd play at top 10 for like 6-7 hours a day. And so people just kept coming and watching, and it wasn't long before I started getting asked to play in tournaments. I formed a team with Clarity, who's long gone at this point, but that was with Kit Kats and with Chalky. We ended up getting an invite to Fight Night, where we competed, and shortly after that, I started getting asked to cast events instead. But that's like sort of where it started to take off, was just a matter of me looking at it and going, you know what, I have a long history playing cards. I know I'm going to be good at this. I'm tracking my win rates. I see that I'm good at this. I'm just going to give it a go, and sort of reckless heed for consequence is what brought me to this point. Like, I don't know what would happen if that project would have failed.
That's a pretty cool story, man. I did not realize that. Yeah, like you weren't even.
You just YOLO'd the whole thing.
Like, yep, we're doing this.
Just go. I love that you bought passes for everyone at your card store, and then instead of doing FNM, you all played Hearthstone one night. You probably, without knowing it, had the first ever in the history of the game fireside gathering on accident.
I might have. Yeah, it was pretty cool. What was funny about it was that we were sitting down there playing. Just we all had free cards, and I was like, man. No, I want real cards. And so while everyone was playing, I bought like a bunch of the 40 packs things, and then like I played against a guy, and I'm just like, it gets like turn 6, I'm like drop down my Cairn, and like turn 7, I'm like Ancient of War. They're like, where'd you get these cards? And turn in like Ragnaros. And they're like,
in the middle. What is
Boulder Fist Ogre? And I'm like, yeah, get him, Ragnaros.
Oh my god, they must have hated you.
That's not like
that was like what was expected of me. Like I was always like the super try hard guy. Like at Friday Night Magic, I was the guy who like would sit there and think super deeply about the play sequence I was going to make. and then try to execute, and they're like, dude, this is Friday Night Magic. What are you doing?
Yeah, like, come on, man.
Stop trying to
Just
bluff
be
me
like
with
shot and
lands.
smack and just doing whatever. Yeah. That's awesome. It's funny because that feeling that you explained right there, where like you discovered the game and then it was just like this obsession. Like I think we all kind of had that when we all first discovered Hearthstone. It was, because I wasn't really a card player at all, but I played a lot of World of Warcraft, so I was just excited for something again like in the Warcraft universe. And then it was like, oh, I really like card games. Who knew? And then it was just like all day, every day. That's all I was doing.
I had just started
that's
playing
awesome.
Magic. I think I'd been playing Magic for like 6 months when it was announced at PAX, and I remember, I feel like we've told the story a million times now, but I remember seeing the announcement and just being like, "This is the dumbest looking thing Blizzard's ever announced." Really, the makers of StarCraft and Diablo and Warcraft, they're coming out with a something that's
card
gonna
game?
go.
Children's cards.
It's gonna be on the App Store. What is this? And then I played it, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this game." But. Yeah. So, well, I guess let's fast forward a bit. The hot topic right now is obviously the big format announcement, the split between Standard and Wild. What are you thinking about all that?
Well, I did a short YouTube video where I kind of compile my thoughts and do them like very briefly on my YouTube channel.
What's your channel?
YouTube. My YouTube is just ThatsAdmirable. All my social media stuff is ThatsAdmirable. Anywhere you want to find it. If it doesn't like if you go to Friendster and type in ThatsAdmirable, it's not there. I don't have a live journal, or I don't have like an RSS feed or anything. But
what about
if you can
Angel
Google
Fire?
it, you can probably find it. So yeah, kind of touching on this question seems to be like the most asked question I've been getting like in the last couple of weeks. And to me, this feels like a very interesting thing because in most card games, this is something you see constantly: is changes and rotations and sectioning off sets to create different formats. In Hearthstone, we really haven't had this yet. It's just been added on and added on and added on. And something that I've really noticed, which is, again, very different from other card games, is that Hearthstone community seems very... change is not very well received. And to me, that's kind of strange. I'm like, you guys really want to force nature Savage War people more?
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 2 years now. And while I still love the game, even though I've been doing it that way, to me, the most exciting part of the card game is when new stuff comes out and when stuff changes and everything's shaken up. And we got to start from the ground and work our way back up to the top again. We don't just keep adding on to the same building we have. It's time to build new ones around it. So for me, this is like the biggest, most exciting thing that's happened in Hearthstone so far. Like bigger than when they announced the World Championships, bigger than the tournaments that have been going on. The fact that we're seeing this big change to me means that it's that same experience you got the first time you played Hearthstone again, which is discovery and everyone working towards like solving this big problem. Like, what are the best decks? How do we win the most? Those sorts of things. So to see that happen, now not only do we get this for the first time, but we also now expect this to happen in the future. So every single year, this is going to get shaken up. Cards are going to leave the format, new cards are going to come into the format, and Wild is going to be the Hearthstone that you always knew. The same game is still there. Nothing has changed about it. The only difference is they've added a way to play the game. And people lament this, oh, well, Wild's not going to get played, nobody likes it. Well, if you look at Magic, for instance, that is the complete opposite of true. The older formats aren't as supported because the cards are so hard to acquire because they cost so much. But if you look at a competitive Legacy deck, you're looking at a couple $1,000s to build it. If you're looking at a competitive Vintage deck, you're looking in like the $10,000 range to even start playing with a single deck. That's not because nobody likes those formats. Mm-hmm. It's because people really love those formats, and the people who have those cards are like, they're very reluctant to get rid of them. And I see Wild kind of going that same direction, except a more supported thing. Like, for instance, imagine if you could get all the $10,000 cards in Magic for $100. Well, you'd buy them and you'd play the old formats because it's fun to play extremely powerful cards that are disgusting and make your opponent go, oh my god, really? And that's going to eventually exist in Hearthstone. It's not quite there yet, but then you also have the standard mode for people who don't want to just play this gigantic, ever-building set, and they want to play a more competitive, diverse, and changing environment. That now exists for them, where I feel like currently that doesn't exist.
No, I agree. I think one of the things though that some people aren't quite sure about is things like taking stuff out of the store, and then also the fact that classic and basic cards will always stick around. What are your thoughts on the classic and basic move, where like this is the core set and it forever will be the core set? Are you okay with that as a Magic player?
Yeah, I think I am, and something I would like to see happen with the classic set, though, is to revisit it and make changes fairly aggressively to some of the cards that are there. Because if you look at Magic core sets have always existed there as well. And we're talking 4th edition, 5th edition, 6th edition. We're now at the point where they don't even call them X edition anymore. They call it like Magic 2016 or Magic 2015 or whatever it's going to be. So with Hearthstone, that's kind of what your base and your classic becomes, is that core set. So when you look at one for Magic, people are like, well, those change all the time. They print new cards. I'm like, for now they do. At 8th edition, they didn't print new cards. They were all reprinted cards. They decided that this is what their core of their game needed to look like this year, and that's what they went with. So with Classic, you kind of have that same thing going on. The only issue I see is that instead of like a functional reprint, where you kind of just get like, it's a new art and it's a new name.
Yeah, like here's a new counter spell for blue, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
It's always going to be Frostbolt. It's always going to be Fireball, but that's okay. That's the core of what Hearthstone is that Warcraft world where people have their core mechanics. I mean,
mages have fireballs.
Mages have been fireballing since like 2004 at this point, and people still play World of Warcraft. I don't necessarily think there's an inherent problem with having this core set unless they're just very reluctant to change. I feel like the core set is really the only thing where they should be very active in their willingness to change cards, where so far they have shown an unwillingness to really make a lot of changes, just to make sure that stays fresh. Like if you have a theme coming up for your set that you really want to support, and there's something in the core set that just really crushes that theme, just change that card for a year. I think that's totally fine.
Sure.
Or just even like find a way to make it not so different from the initial design, but make it a little bit less powerful so it doesn't impact this new design that you've been working on for a year and a half or whatever it's going to be. But I like the idea that a core set's there because not only does that help you have some sort of definition for the format where not everything is completely in upheaval, but it also helps players stay involved in the game where you can comfortably collect your core set and know that those cards are going to be with you for as long as you want to play Hearthstone. If you only want to play new cards, you have that investment that's always going to be there. Like that's kind of like your initial goal, and then dusting and recrafting the new cards as they continue to come out should be there. So I actually like the compromise that they've made to that, rather than just like the reprinting a bunch of cards in new sets all the time.
And I agree with that 100%. I think the issue for me was like, so that means Tyrion will be here forever and ever and ever. Like, is it boring if Tyrion is still like the top legendary after, X amount of years? But in the end, I think the trade-off is fine. Like what you said, having these cards exist forever means you earn them and you have them and you feel like you've gotten somewhere, regardless of the changes that come. But I also think it's cool that they kind of create a baseline for like, this is how powerful a legendary should be. This is how powerful a burn spell should be. This is what the mana cost should be to do 6 damage to something. That kind of is always the baseline that is now set, and everything can fluctuate around that. So,
yeah,
I'm overall on your camp. In your camp,
and Admirable, you brought it up, and we've been talking about it the last couple of episodes. Like Savage Roar and Force of Nature. That is something that will be sticking around, but changes will be made. So personally, I'm just curious to see what the changes are going to be before I know how excited or not excited to get.
Yeah. We need to see the changes first before we can really...
In a recent interview, Ben Brode said that the amount of cards that would be changed would probably be less than 20. So...
More than 2, less than 20.
More than 2, less than 20.
Lots of wiggle room there.
Yeah, I'm like, okay.
Which, to me, more than 2 means Force of Nature, Savage Roar. Those are the 2.
At least those
At least them.
See, I personally would like to see a lot more of the course cards designed more to fit the flavor of what they actually do in Warcraft. And so with Force of Nature, it does really kind of make sense. Savage Roar, I feel like, is a little bit off-base in that regard. Like, I think you could probably change it into like a beast thematic card so that it becomes more of a build around, and then also make it a lot cheaper. But that way it doesn't affect like random charge minions. Like now you have to get beasts on the board, but Savage Roar becomes very effective if you manage to get a board full of beasts. Like that to me feels totally okay. Force of Nature, I have gone back and forth on this card. I would like to see it more of like a utility card instead. Something like 2 mana, make 3/1/1, treants with charge. They can only attack minions. That feels like a really nice card to fight for board, stuff like that. But in terms of changes, like when he says more than 2 and less than 20, I think the idea he's trying to give you there is like expect some changes to be made, but not so drastic that Hearthstone is just a different game than what you know.
Sure.
Yeah, he's managing expectations with this statement is what he's doing.
Yeah. Smart.
Which I don't think
I rarely do.
Well, I mean, they have talked in the past about how conservative that they like to be when it comes to nerfing cards, and that they absolutely are not going to be buffing things. So, I mean, I would be surprised if we had as many as 20. I think we're probably going to see somewhere in and around the maybe 10 card range of things that are going to be changed. And I think we've talked about some of them before, like Knife Juggler, Force of Nature, Savage Roar. Like I really don't think that there's that many things in the basic and classic sets that really need to be looked at.
Big Game Hunter.
Oh,
Please, for the love of God.
I actually really like the Big Game Hunter design, and I would like to see more stuff go that direction. Where
Well, I like tech cards, but I feel like Big Game Hunter is too broad. You know, like something like Black Knight is a little bit more. Well, that'll fit a meta.
Yeah, I
like Big Game Hunter is just like directly counters like many things.
I'm there
That's
with
another
you.
one that if it could only like target beasts, that would make a lot of sense.
Well, then you basically have Hammett
We got that
Nessingwary.
card. It's called Hammett Nessingwary.
Yeah.
And I have thrown him into the shredder many times.
For Hammett.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, my personal opinion on it is I think removal's good for the game, and I actually think what I'd like to see more cheap removal. Like a card that comes to mind for me is Swords to Plowshares or Magic. It's a 1 white. It's instant. You remove a creature from the game. Its controller gains life equal to its power. An incredibly powerful card for 1 mana. But something to think about is people would go, oh, well, that just goes in the aggro decks here, and the aggro decks run over everybody. And I go, kind of. Imagine an aggro deck having to move a big minion out of the way. Like, you gain 7 life, attack you. You're like, that may have negated your attack for a turn. This card may have bogged down your curve at some point because it's so powerful you decide you need to fit in your deck. But now picture what Control can do with this card instead, where it sits back, it really figures out where it needs to dedicate its resources, and then slowly over time build that advantage, knowing they kind of have this safety net card in their back pocket. To me, Control is like the one thing that's suffering in this game. Like, I feel like Control is so hard to play. Like, every single turn you're on the back foot because your opponent almost never draws a dead card. They're almost always drawing something with action, and then that can attack you directly, so you can't just sit with a minion on board and block it. So to see cards like Swords of Plowshares or Doomblade or just anything that's like cheap removal spells, I think is very good for the game. Like, to me, Big Game Hunter is saving a lot of spots from happening where Dr. Boom might just absolutely win the game every single time it hits the board. The reason that Dr. Boom is even close to in check is because of a card like Big Game Hunter. Like, that's the best feeling in the world, is when you have minions on board, they play a Dr. Boom, you attack them, you Big Game Hunter it, and you say go. And they go, oh, well, I hope my Boombots roll right. Like, that's a pretty good situation to be in post Dr. Boom. Where imagine before, you don't have any sort of removal to it. You're like, crap, I have to put all my minions into his Dr. Boom. He has Boombots left. I didn't deal him any damage. I didn't swing the board. I got no advantage from this. Removal is good for those situations where it really is thought-provoking, not only deck building, but also in-game play. So I would like to see them go more towards that direction and print cards that are more like Big Game Hunter. Where for a while I didn't necessarily agree with that. But
would you rather see them more in spell form rather than... Because I think what makes Big Game Hunter kind of such a swing is someone invests like, say, 8 mana in a Ragnaros, and then you spend 3 mana, kill the Ragnaros, and get a body at the same exact time. Whereas the cards you were describing kind of have like, my card, it's a 1-for-1 exchange. My card is gone, his card is gone. And yeah, there's some sort of drawback to my removal, like, giving the opponent health or something like that. Or say like, cards like, I can't think of the name of it, but it's like 1 black, sacrifice a creature, remove a creature. Things like that in Magic a lot of times exist that way, and not necessarily in the form of minions, which I think Hearthstone does more often. Like, this minion kills this, and you get the body at the same exact time, which I think is one of the reasons why the design is a little funky. And I would like to see more cards, like interesting cards like Naturalize, I think is a really interesting card that obviously doesn't see play, but it's like, oh, for 1 mana, kill anything. Oh, the guy draws 2 cards. Like, there's a drawback. But it's like, there's room in that kind of space to play, I think, where more classes have removal, but it's not just based on like neutral minions, right?
Yeah, I think
it's more spells and the way they remove things.
I feel like a lot of that also is stemming from the fact that minions are just so like over efficient at the moment too. I mean,
sure.
Like you get Haunted Creeper, Muster for Battle, Piloted Shredder. I mean,
all going away, by the way, in Standard.
Such good cards.
Yeah,
it's like if you play a Piloted Shredder and you follow up with Big Game Hunter on their big thing, they're just dead. Like they've already shown that they can't really kill the Piloted Shredder if it has managed to live for a turn. Even if it did get dealt with, they still have a second body to deal with. You're just taking so much damage that a card like Big Game Hunter enables really your big push at the end. Sure. I think more so than anything else. So I think a lot of that stems from the fact that just minions are so efficient, and there's like the board sweeps are just really not very good. There's not really a lot of tools to fight back against stuff other than just those tools themselves. Like the ideal situation in Hearthstone right now is you get ahead of your opponent and you stay ahead of your opponent. There's not really a ton of recovery except for big Shadow Flame turns, which take a tremendous amount of setup to really get done. Light Bomb was so close to making it well for Priest, but just wasn't quite the tool they needed.
A lot of times you Light Bomb and you don't play anything. Like you just Light Bomb. That's your turn. Yeah. So it's
not like a Light Bomb and then on turn 7 you remove their guy and then play a 6-mana guy.
Yeah.
Brawl leaves a guy behind afterwards, so you need a weapon on board. Like all the board sweeps required such a tremendous amount of setup that just from a pure logistics standpoint, the aggro decks are performing better because they don't really have to have a setup. Like no minion is the wrong minion really. They all attack. If they sit there on board, they're going to keep hitting you over and over again. Fiery War Axe doesn't always kill a 4/4.
Yeah. No, that's true. It's a very good point.
It's kind of just a byproduct, and it's something we don't talk about again because we've been with the game so long now, but it's just kind of a byproduct of a perfect mana curve. You don't have the issue that you run into something with Magic where you're drawing a card that literally does nothing if you don't need more mana.
Right, and I think that's something that is also Control is really suffering from too, is that one of the benefits that Control always had was their mana base. Their mana base was always extremely consistent, but now the aggro decks are also extremely consistent, which isn't a bad thing. I think the consistency is very good. The problem is you just need the right tools to fight back and forth for each position. The problem with that is balancing it right so that way your removal spells aren't so strong that it degenerates into purely a control format. And like that, I mean, that's a very delicate thing to balance, and it's extremely difficult. I don't really blame them for being safe on those sorts of big board sweeps. Like in Magic, we saw Wrath of God dominate for like 14 years or something before finally they printed some good aggro cards, and then the red decks started winning. Like, finally, we can actually kill them even if they Wrath of God sometimes.
Yeah.
Where before it was never the case. If you got Wrath of God on turn 4, the game was over. You lost your 3 guys. You didn't have a recovery. Your deck wasn't built to play 5 and 6 mana cards. You only had 1 to 3 mana cards left. And so now that dynamic has changed. So that's one of the reasons why I think that going towards the board sweep mechanic isn't necessarily the answer, but it is obviously explorable. But something like very direct removal for very cheap, I think gives you a better position for both the aggro decks and for the control decks. So the mid-range decks have to balance, do I need to have more threats against the control decks? Do I need to have more efficient cards to handle the aggro decks? Do I need to be worried about the mirror matches? A lot of different stuff goes on when you have enough removal spells available that I feel like it creates a dynamic that continues to cycle over itself, rather than right now we see just kind of people moving towards more and more statistically efficient builds.
Well said.
And you can tell this guy plays a lot of card games.
Yeah, really. A whole lot of that Magic talk is just way over my head. Well, you did what? The what now with a hoop?
Magic tends to kind of go in this, at least from my understanding, tends to go from early in the formats, aggro kind of dominates, and then control gets stronger as people figure out the efficient tools to use for control decks. I'm kind of hoping that standard follows somewhat in the same pattern where it's as people figure it out, control does become stronger. And there's just kind of an ebb and flow to every standard rotation. I think it would be really interesting.
I'd like to see that as well.
I definitely want to see that as well. And a lot of that's just going to come down to availability of tools. And so just in the beginning, what's going to end up happening is we're going to fall into the same pattern we always did, where we dismiss a lot of cards when reviewing the Hearthstone sets, and then 2 months down the road, we see someone play at a tournament, and they go, "Oh, that actually really does answer every single thing that he plays every single turn. That's really good."
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk real quick because we do got to get to the news. But real quick, the World Championship format, the new one for this season. What are your thoughts on that? Because a lot of changes were made this year.
The new one so far this season, they did leave themselves the caveat that they could change it if they wanted to.
That is true. Yeah.
So, of course, in 2015, I was mostly a broadcaster. I played very few tournaments. I think I played only 2 tournaments, honestly, the entire time. I was basically just doing casting. And when I saw these changes, I was like, this is what competitive Hearthstone needed. You needed more support from the developer end. And before, it was 1 World Championship. So it was 8 months of grinding, fade a double elimination tournament, hope you make it to BlizzCon. That's a lot of work if you're a full-time player. You're basically reliant off of third-party tournaments to really get anything done. But for this one, it's 2 months. After 2 months, they evaluate top 128. Those guys play off, make it to the top 8, go to the championship. That to me is the way that format should be working. There's a couple of things that I personally am not too happy about with like the number of points that are available through open tournaments. It feels like almost anyone can get an open tournament. That upsets me a little bit. But for the most part, the changes are exactly the direction the game needed to go, which is having more major premier championships and also having your world championships at the end. So there's just not only more coverage, but also more opportunities and also more money in the competitive side of things. So much so for me that I started competing again this year.
Awesome. Well, what do you think about the multiple, like you can earn either EU or NA or China, or like, are you, because I think I saw a tweet about you saying that like an idea that you would like to see maybe is just choose your region, and that's your region and you go.
Yeah, I think your region of residence should be just where your ladder's at. I don't have a problem with them allowing multiple play on multiple servers.
Sure.
Like, kind of from my own personal aspect, because it does benefit me. But even despite the fact that it benefits me, I feel like they should change it more to a uniformed decision, where if you live in Asia, you play in Asia. If you live in NA, you play in NA. If you live in Europe, you play in Europe, period.
Yeah, I agree. It separates the regions out so they actually matter. And also, it would be weird to see like Savitz qualify in NA or something like that, and suddenly he's playing out of the NA, regional. It's like that's weird. Like that doesn't make sense.
That was,
but also you just get more players. So
is that you can only compete in your region in terms of the actual preliminaries and then the championship for that season, but you can earn points.
You can earn points on
any of the servers. Yeah, that is really I think where it's kind of weird. I'm like, my points get taken from Europe and put onto my NA account.
Yeah, there's a disconnect there. It's kind of bizarre. Like, I beat out EU players to earn NA points. Like, okay.
I'm a top NA player. I could beat EU.
Well, how are you doing so far this season as far as competing?
39th in points for NA over the course of 2 seasons. So I finished 22nd the first season, which is very happy with that, of course. After kind of talking with some people, I felt like 10 points was basically locked for a top 128 spot after we did some crazy guerrilla math. And we kind of got to this point where I still wanted to make a top 100 finish, but I was at PAX the whole weekend, so it was really difficult to make that push. But with the preliminaries coming up this week, I'm super excited about it. I feel very comfortable in the decisions I've made for this tournament. This feels like the most prepared I have been for a tournament in probably about a decade.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Well, good luck.
Nice. I'm excited to see how you do.
Yeah.
Also, I'm going to be the next time
you
the next time you the next time you go to cast something like PAX, I'm going to be watching you to see if it looks like you're playing Hearthstone at the table to for that final push.
On my phone.
And keep my
What did you say? Hang on, I got lethal.
Hold on. Yeah, I need 7 + 2. Yeah, I got them.
Your co-caster's looking over at your screen being like, wait, are you playing the game or are you watching the game we're casting? What's going on here?
He's like, no, play the Azure Drake.
Oh, wonderful. Well, awesome. Well, let's get into this week's Hearthstone news because there is some jazz to be discussed.
Good news, everyone!
Probably the big news this week is that the World Championship is actually kicking into gear. We had the winter preliminaries for the European region this past week. And guys, there were 151 players. No big names qualified. No one that most of you would probably recognize made the top 8.
Well, I recognize Naaman's name, but not because of a good reason.
Not because of a positive connection.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
Yeah.
But so apparently he was banned last year, but the ban has been lifted this year, so he's back in and he's qualified. So congratulations. And I think Tars, I've seen that name before, but I can't place where.
Tars played in he recently qualified for the PGL Tavern Tales.
Okay.
So
all right.
You may have heard of him there.
Yeah, no.
I didn't watch
it might
that.
have just been like reading like people who were in the top 100 of the rankings at the end of the season.
That could have happened.
I always scroll through those. So
yeah.
Admirable, do you have any thoughts on this top 8? Any players that jump out to you?
Okay, so I'm gonna get a little real talk here for a second.
All right.
This event, I don't expect this to happen every single time. Obviously, you play this through this 100 times. I expect the bigger names to be winning more often. Period. But to me, this is really a big statement of why formats are so important. Kind of tying this back into the point we visited at the start. As a format continues to grow older and older, we're going to see these problems get solved more and more. The decks are distributing become so much more refined. There's a wealth of information available to players at their fingertips on Google. How do you actually get a deck building edge over someone? Because in terms of the in-game mechanical decision making and like making sure you set everything up and sequencing, the players at the top end pretty much have this down. It's not really like a mystery at this point. They stop, they think through their turn. They're very good at seeing lines of play. There's still errors that people make, of course, but a lot of those times those errors are fairly negligible, and a lot of those times those errors just go unpunished. And so something that's the error that really doesn't go unpunished is deck building.
Sure.
You got to go through 8 rounds sometimes with the same decks, and if you built yours wrong, that's gonna affect you every single round, regardless of how well you actually play in the game. That deck building decision that's the largest part of card games. That's what makes card games interesting. If the format just continues to grow older and older, that innovation becomes lost. And when I say innovation, I don't necessarily mean that like deck builders have an edge over certain situations. What I mean is that the people at the beginning of a format who are willing to put in the most time and have the best style of work with those cards end up typically building better decks and coming more prepared to events. At this point, like, I don't even really build my own lists anymore. I quite literally go look at what people were playing and kind of just copy those lists. They're just always so good. Like, I look at them like, wow, there's not a card in this deck I want to change. You know, how often do you feel that way the first time you built a deck when TGT came out?
Yeah.
You build a deck and you'd be like, oh, this deck sucks. I'm going to build a new one. You build the next one, you'd be like, this is pretty good. I got like 20 cards right out of this one. That's still a lot of work to do. But at this point, all the deck building edge is so close that the in-game play edge is really kind of lost.
Sure.
And so because of that, a lot of those big names are not, instead of fighting on their 65% margins that oftentimes they had before, now they're fighting on like these 51 to 54% margins. And that's going to be a drastic difference in win rate. I think that's a very large reason why you didn't see a big names qualify for this event, was simply because the in-game decision-making is much smaller than the outside of the game decision-making, which currently I feel like doesn't exist because we don't have rotating formats.
So by that line of thinking, do you think for the next round of preliminaries, when we hit spring and hopefully the expansion has released, that we're going to see a return, we're going to see names that we're more familiar with that are household names more frequently make the top 8?
I'd be much more willing to bet on those big names.
Sure.
Let's put it that way.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Like a guy like Strifecrow, I think, is going to do really well at the beginning of a new format, right? Because he's going to see like how to build a deck properly much faster than a lot of people. But you're right. Like right now, we know what the best Druid list looks like. You know, we just know what it is. And you don't need to be really good to know what that list looks like. You can just look it up, and there it is. That's the best Druid list, and there's no real, decision making to be made there. It's a good point.
And it's different, from class to class. Some classes are more figured out than others. You take something like Tempo Mage, you're not going to see a lot of variation. But
yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
like your any Finn can happen deck, there's lots of variation there. Unfortunately, that's not like a top. That may be a top deck though after standard hits, because a lot of those cards are new, and cycle cards are still there, so it'll be interesting.
I didn't even think about that. That's a really good point.
Yay, Murlocs.
Yes.
When Secret Paladin is dead, Murlocs rise to the top.
That's good. I'm glad, because I really enjoy anything can happen Paladin decks. So bring it on. I'm all for that becoming a better deck.
Yeah, and sort of, I guess, to round up my point, it was the EU event. I mean, so how many big names could we have seen? We haven't even seen the NA ones yet, right? I mean, that's where the real big names come from. I'm just saying.
Yeah, who's heard of Kalento and Sixo and Gara? And,
the world champion Osaka. Who's ever heard of these guys?
Yeah, Green Sheet.
Tice, one of the best performing players in 2015.
This guy doesn't even know that J's make J sounds. Stupid.
Oh my
nice
god.
cultural heritage.
Oh my god.
Litigious, man. Get it right.
Oh,
Joe, come on, guys. Pull it together.
That may be my favorite Dillsism of 2016. You're going to have to try real hard to beat that one, Dills. God. Oh, damn it. That was great. All right, cool. So we have links in the show notes, by the way, folks. If you missed the preliminaries, go check them out. The VOD's like 11 hours long, though, so I don't know if you're going to go sit back and watch the whole darn thing if you missed it already. Blizzard had their fourth quarter earnings call this past week. So officially, according to them, Hearthstone has surpassed 40 million registered players, and that's before League of Explorers launched. And also,
this is defined as people who have played through the tutorial, which is
right.
Which could mean like they played once and then they never touched it again. But They at least like stuck around that long.
Yeah, it's not just people who just made an account for God knows what reason.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
and then
me.
Just was like, oh, what? I have to do stuff? No, never mind. Like they actually had to go through and actually play a little bit of the game.
You know what that does? That faces at people like me who have a Smurf Heroes account that never logged into their Hearthstone account over there.
Yes, exactly.
That's what that edits out. Also, LOE sold 20% more units in the first 6 weeks of release over Blackrock Mountain within the same time frame.
Wow. That kind of makes sense. I think a lot of people were talking about how much fun League of Explorers was compared to previous previous adventures. So I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Like it was a really, really good and entertaining experience outside of just even the cards that you got for playing it.
Yep. And more players obviously means that as they continue to add players, every expansion and adventure should sell more technically until the game stops growing.
Benefit of promotion. Blackrock Mountain, I don't think was at BlizzCon.
No.
If I recall correctly, and League of Explorers, that was like their big BlizzCon moment. Like I remember going to sit down and seeing Ben Brode come out on stage and take a picture of him wearing that funny Explorers hat as he presented all the cards. Like to me, I saw that I was like, oh my gosh, this set is awesome. And I think a lot of it also just comes from the design too. Like Blackrock Mountain, to me, there's a lot of cards I read them and I go, why does that card do that?
Yeah,
I don't really understand. But with League of Explorers cards, I read the card and I go, oh, that makes sense. That I understand exactly why Elise Starseeker gives me a map to find a golden monkey. Her job is to do research about this archaeological stuff.
They did such a good job with the narrative of the adventure.
Yes.
And that something we've talked about on this show is that Naxxramas and Blackrock were very beholden to what came before it in World of Warcraft, whereas League of Explorers, they got to go just hog wild. They got to really put their Hearthstone stamp on it and less of the Warcraft stamp on it.
Yeah. I'm actually curious.
Blackrock Mountain had that dumb song, too.
Yeah.
Blackrock Mountain, a Hearthstone adventure.
Mountain, a Hearthstone adventure.
It didn't even rhyme. What are you doing?
Some great rolled R's right there, sir. Thank you.
Little known fact, that was actually ThatsAdmirable singing that song. Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't even know.
on top of being a fantastic caster, does great VO work, but only if you need a dwarf. Only if you need a dwarf.
Best dwarf in the biz.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, if you want to check out my dwarf forces, just hit me up on my live journal and my RSS feeds. And
I've got a website I built with Angel Fire.
I actually thought for a second somebody else just joined the call there. That was
.html.
Yeah. Yes. It's just turned into one of our call-in episodes out of nowhere. All right, well, before we end news, Ben Brode did a couple more interviews this week, which means it's time for Brode Bellows. So he did a whole lot of chatting this week. I love when we have a guest on and they're not used to the bumpers. Yes. He did an interview with ShackNews.com and PCGamer.com. I should say another interview with PCGamer.com. There's been a lot of Hearthstone interviews over there recently. Talked more on the subject of the formats that are coming out. It's hilarious because once again the discussion of Druid, specifically Force and Roar, came up once again, but no need to retread that. But he talked about some other stuff. This is where the card changes will be more than 2, less than 20 comment came from, was this set of interviews, which we referenced earlier in the show. He did say that there are no plans to buff cards during the balance patch. So you will only be seeing nerfs, not buffs.
I'm pretty sure that they either in the frequently asked questions on the blog post or possibly an interview that he did on the same day that they made the big announcement. I'm pretty sure that they said because it takes so much more when you buff a card, like you have to change so many other cards as a result of that, that they weren't going to buff, like pretty much ever. They nerf, not buff.
Well, I'm glad he reiterated because I did not remember hearing that.
Sorry, Magma Rager.
See, I want to see Magma and Ice Rager, where you choose one, it becomes a 5/1 or a 5/2. That's the next step for Magma Rager. We have Ice Rager, it's a 5/2. I want to see choose one, 5/1 or 5/2.
5/2.
Build your own power creep is basically what you're pitching here. I love that. Oh, they said that kind of retreading. They said the bulk of balance efforts would be dedicated to standard. We've heard that already, but that doesn't mean they're not going to balance wild. Wild balancing will just be reactive.
At some point, some deck will be insane in wild. Years down the road, and they'll have to do something, or else it'll just become a stale format. But I like the idea that they'll basically stay hands off and just let it go crazy.
Yeah.
And then if like they need to step in, then they reserve the right to do so.
Somewhere there is a troll right now going, I don't know what you're talking about. There already is that deck. It's called Secret Paladin. Nerf.
Yeah. Eventually, like Wild will just be just a bunch of decks that can kill you on turn 3, like all playing against each other, and it'll be amazing. Yeah.
Yes,
So
that is
good.
the format I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
I don't.
Minute and a half long games.
Yeah.
You say that, and I don't hear it as a negative. I know
Look,
some
on
people
turn
do.
1, I'm going to draw like 7 cards, and then on turn 2, I'm going to like play a bunch of weird minions. It's going to be awesome.
That sounds awesome to me.
I'm
Yeah,
trying to.
that is basically like Commander Magic right now.
I'm trying to think of how
or,
you make
like,
that happen.
modern.
Yeah, we're gonna have something where we ramp out Nat Pagal and something else that actually makes his ability function. I don't know.
It's sweet.
I'd like to see like a legendary minion to compensate for that, like a 7-cost mage legendary. And it says if this card is in your hand and your opponent casts a spell, if counter spell is in your deck, pull counter spell and the legendary from your hand and you counter that spell. So like if you have it in your hand,
That's a lot of card text.
you like play your 2-drop and say they like wrath your 2-drop. The 7-drop disappears from your hand. The counter spell gets pulled from your deck. The wrath is countered. And you never had to actually play your secret. You just had to draw your big legendary. I think that would be like a good compromise to like the counter spell that is needed to kind of hold that potential wild glue together. Just stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that I think about. I'm like, how can I make a card where I can do 2 very different things with it instead of 2 kind of different things? But like that, to me, that like if wild gets out of hand, you just print a card like that and everything's fine.
Sure.
I want to see how that would be written though for Hearthstone.
Well, the thing is that the cards that are going to exist in Wild will have to like kind of make their way through Standard, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, Wild will be balanced retroactively, kind of. Because you can't make a card that's just insane. You can't make a card that says like play this and win. You're gonna actually have to like get it through the Standard format first.
You mean Mysterious Challenger?
yeah, that card exists, man. Dr. Six.
They said, Broad said that new heroes have not been given up on, that they just haven't made any new ones yet. But, quote, said, we may hear about new heroes in the not too distant future.
I find that so interesting that they like half launched a feature. They were like, here's the 3 new things. Or no, wait, was he talking about like new heroes like Death Knights? Or was he talking about new heroes like
not
skins?
classes. Yeah, heroes.
Yeah,
He
okay,
said
so,
specifically
skins.
heroes, yeah.
So
Yes.
they gave us like this little sampling of like a third of the heroes being like, here's stuff to buy. And we got all excited. And then they were just like, oh yeah, no, we haven't even done anything else past that. Like, what?
That is one of the things I do not think about until I either A, look at our inbox, or B, check our Twitter, because I'm surprised by the amount of people that say exactly that. Like, hey, where are the other heroes? I would like a different warlock or something like
Yeah.
that. And I'm like, okay,
There is no
have a
different
different
warlock.
Well, yeah,
it's
that's
Gul'dan
true.
or nothing.
It's pretty much a whole bunch of
But do you
different
guys
orcs,
remember
so-
when this was announced? Everyone was just crapping all over it, and now it seems there's this definitely part of the community that wants a ton more, customized heroes.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. Got one right here.
I
I
do
just want
love
them to
that
make-
I could play with Illyria.
I just want them to make anything I can buy. Like,
Just
Like,
let me throw my
more
money at
stuff
you,
to buy.
Blizzard.
yes, like I have to be like one of the best Hearthstone customers in the world. I'm like, you know what? I really do have to have 2 golden harvest golems. Period. I just have to have them. You know what? I could craft a regular Ragnaros, but I already have a regular Ragnaros, so I'm just gonna craft a golden one instead. Like,
Oh, and people call me the 1%. At least I'm not crafting gold legendaries yet.
Jocelyn,
I have-
it's okay.
I
You're
have too
still
many of them.
you're
I
still the
spent,
Hearthstone
I spent like
1%.
$4,000 on Hearthstone.
Jocelyn,
I've never
there's,
added it up.
we did just have the earnings call. There's over 40 million players. There is room in the 1% for you and Admirable.
Yeah.
Okay.
1% is pretty big at this point. Yeah.
All right.
I will say I got this close to crafting Golden Dr. Boom, and then we got the standard announcement, and I was like, dodge that bullet.
Close one.
Yeah.
Day 1, baby.
But you know what's going to happen, Jocelyn, is new expansions are going to come out. We're going to get Standard/Wild split, and you're going to find that you love Wild, so you're going to want to go back. You're going to wish you had already crafted it. Well, maybe
It
not,
happened.
because there'll be a ton of new cards, and you can spend dust on that, but never mind. My analogy is stupid.
There are no stupid analogies, just stupid people.
Thanks, Admirable. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well done.
Some people, I included this just because I know it'll make someone out there very happy. Ben Bro did say they were very wrong about Undertaker back in the day.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that
I mean,
card's
I remember when that card came out, I was like, oh, this card seems all right. And then
Yeah.
Backspace goes, well, think about it. You just play that guy on turn 1, and then you play that Hunt Creeper card on turn 2, and then you play Harvest Golem, and turn 3 out, it's like, oh my god, this card is absurd. Like, you get to just play all the best minions, and now you have also a 1-drop that supports all these best minions.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this
turn
is
4,
this
your
is
1-drop
bad.
is a Yeti, and you've also got a bunch of other sticky minions on board. That card was insane.
Everyone was worried about Mad Scientist.
You know what though is Mad Scientist turned out to still be like very good, but fine. But like the card, like Undertaker basically enabled decks that would never exist to be completely overpowered.
Right.
I mean, suddenly Priest had its day in the sun, which I thought was great, but at the expense we had to deal with Hunter.
A funny thing about Undertaker though was if you actually like my friends like people who play competitively at the top end, they track their win rates. Period. Mm-hmm. When we were looking at games where Undertaker was available, in the mirror matches of Undertakers, we all had like 75 to 80% win rates. And we're like, are we just drawing Undertaker that much more? Is that possible? Like, we played like 400 games of this matchup so far. And the answer was no. The answer was just we were just dedicating the resources better back and forth and like trapping people better. It was really weird because it was in mirror matches, it was very skill intensive, but in non-mirror matches, the card was absurd busted. It was totally unfair. You either had to be the Undertaker guy or the anti-Undertaker guy. Yeah. So the problem with it was kind of like that it not necessarily the card took away skill from the actual gameplay, but that it was too oppressive to what was happening. Like you had one direction or the other, and that was it. That was really kind of the unfortunate part about that card. But honestly, cards that are very strong like that allow those sorts of decisions to be made, good stuff. But Undertaker, bad way to do it.
just a little too much. The problem I always had with it was just sometimes, you could deal with it sometimes, but sometimes that meant swiping their 1-drop on turn 4 and things like that. And it was like, it sucks when I have to do that. And now I'm just behind forever and ever and ever. And, and it just feels bad. It's one of those feels bad man cards, like Mind Control. Mind Control wasn't OP, but it felt really, really bad to have your awesome dude taken away from you for 8 mana. So,
especially when we're talking, it's just original vanilla Hearthstone, and BGH is also still a thing. Your big minions are just doomed in back then.
And Tink Master.
Oh, poor Tink Master.
But when you play Jeweled Scarab and you get Tink Master, you have to take Tink Master.
That was one of my...
It just automatically goes to your hand.
Yeah, you see him, you take him. That's just how it works. And then you turn your Scarab into a 5/5, and it's sweet.
Man,
I feel like you've done this more than like anybody else on the planet.
Probably. No, Noxious has probably done it more than me. But yeah, it's,
Dills.
Just one of those little rules I made for myself.
Oh, that's great. Well, before we move into strategy, let's thank our patrons over at patreon.com for supporting the show. If you enjoy what we're doing here, you want to throw something our way, that is where you can help us out. On this episode, we wanted to thank Tony C., Pedro, Alex L., Victor W., and Peter. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. Now we're going to doctor some decks, which doesn't mean that Boom is necessarily involved. It's just what we call this.
He's probably involved.
It is very hard. Wanna blow something up? Time to pay!
So for this week's strategy discussion, we thought we'd bring back deck doctoring, and we still had plenty of them just hanging out in our inbox. And by the way, if you want to send in your decks to be doctored, we're not guaranteeing we're doing it next week, but at some point we will do it again. Send those in to tacpodcast@gmail.com. So we're going to be doing 2 of them today, guys. And first up is Eric's RNG Mage, which
already I love this deck.
Already delivers on what the title promises.
Casino Mage is one of my favorite decks ever that was actually viable.
Yeah, well, he took the whole casino and bolted it to the side of the deck.
Yeah, he went crazy. Yeah,
so, he also wrote in. He said, I thought it would be fun to build a mage deck around spells, summoning minions, and minions summoning spells. And I believe there's potential locked down in there. But I haven't been able to bring it out consistently yet. I'm not sure if I'm playing the deck wrong, really bad at picking cards during the discover phase, or if the deck just isn't viable. But I think the randomness in it gives it lots of room for fun and infinite possibilities. So, if you're watching the video version, the deck list is up. If you're on audio version, we're going to try to make this as friendly for you as possible.
Well, I'm looking over his deck right now, and I'm seeing a few cards that aren't random enough, man.
Well, it's the random, but it's also the creating one thing out of another thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, which I'm totally okay with. But Pyroblast? No. It doesn't do
And
random
we
10
should-
damage to your face. It does 10 damage someone.
We should also mention that actually both of these decks that we're going to look at today are from free-to-play players. So it could
So they may
just
not
be
have
that
all
they may not have all the tools.
A
Yeah.
lot of their choices may have been made based on what they actually had available to them. But
Yeah.
I'm going to treat it like, he's the 1% from here on out. We're going to tell him like what to add.
Yeah, that being said,
much
though,
crap.
this guy does have Nexus Champion Sarad chilling in his deck, and the next
Sure.
guy has Boom and Alexstrasza. So these are very either really thrifty with their Dust players or super lucky with the few packs that they are opening.
Well,
Yeah, I'm
Nexus
going with
Champion Sarad is a super fun card. And I actually did see play. I think it was Hot Form who played it in his Tempo Mage deck at the NA championships, and played it. I mean, it's a threat. It was, I think, one of the reasons he played it. It's a card that has to be dealt with, or it can get out of hand. And I think it's one of my favorite legendaries that I always want to play and don't get a chance to too much. But I, what I would say to this guy is like, I think you can maneuver your way out of some of these cards that aren't quite as random and find other options that are like fit the theme really well, but are also going to break the game open for you in a lot of situations. So like things like, Unstable Portal fit that mold, but I wouldn't put in something like Clockwork Gnomes or Mech Yetis unless you're running Archmage Antonidas, which he's not running. So, to me, I see those cards as being like step one of like, here's some cards we can cut. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
No, I do. He probably, I would assume, just doesn't have Antonidas, because
Yeah,
I
that
would
was
say
actually
the same.
the PS to this email is that he doesn't have Antonidas. Otherwise, he'd be
Okay.
in the deck. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay, yeah.
probably an Antonidas instead of, I would say, Pyroblast.
Because that's what I'm assuming his Pyroblast is here for. He
Yeah.
just needs something to put him over the edge so he
Something
can
to
actually
finish them.
close out
Yeah.
some of these games. Which, if you had access to Antonidas, that's who you would want to throw in here instead of Pyroblast.
But without Antonidas, I think you then chuck the Mech Yeti, chuck the Clockwork Gnome. Like, I get that they synergize well with Flame Waker, but, I don't think they synergize. Like, you have to play the minion, then get the spare part, and then have the spare part for the Flame. Like, there's other ways I think you can enable your Flame Waker without those guys. Because I think I'd still rather have, instead of a Mech Yeti, a piloted Shredder, right? I mean...
Yes. that is
Yeah, but see,
definitely-
that's a minion that makes a minion, not a minion that makes a spell. The
Oh,
Mechanical Yeti is the
wow,
minion that makes a
okay.
spell. Yeah.
It's still... Okay. Got to break your rules a little
Themes
bit.
still. Themes.
Admirable, what are you thinking when you look at this list?
Well, I'm always really poor at sticking with themes. I'm always like, well, how can we just win more? So I'm right there with you. I'm like, man, Pilot Shredder looks like it's a great fit in here. Minion summoning spells and spell summoning minions.
I think piloted is okay because it is random. And granted, yes, his general idea is minion summoning spells and spell summoning minions, but he did just title it RNG Mage, so technically we're still in the theme by
Yeah,
adding
we're in the
piloted
ballpark.
shredders.
What about maybe Summoning Stone? Because then even though Summoning Stone is a minion making minions, you need the spell as an activator to make the minion.
Well, I mean, I think that sounds hilarious and fun. Are we trying to win with this deck, or are we just trying to do hilarious and fun stuff? Because
That's always my number one question: is what's the goal of the deck?
yeah.
Is
Are
the
we
goal of the
trying
deck
to
win
win?
as much as we can with the theme, or is it just win as much as we can? Those are two very different things.
I believe
Yes.
the goal here is to win as much as we can while still staying within the theme, which is why I would
Okay.
make the argument for piloted shredder.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
agree
I
with
think actually both of these people, when they wrote in, were saying they were around 50% win rates, which is most of the Deck Doctor emails that we get are around that win rate. So I would say that they want to win more than 50% of
Sure.
the time. So
Which means you're gonna have to sacrifice a little. Like, okay,
some of your fun.
when I play
to
my
win.
Rogobot deck, the theme is to conceal my Alarmobot. However, I have to sacrifice a little bit to put in things like Eviscerate and Backstab. So I can't just go
Still need
all
some
around.
core. Some
yeah,
core
you
cards.
still gotta do some stuff. Yeah. So first of all, I'd say cut things like Pyroblast, and like I think you could go one Polymorph. I think you could go. Let's see,
I think
one.
He's missing
one,
a Flame Cannon, which I
one
think would
Forgotten
also
Torch.
and
Well, yeah.
Venom.
So like something like Flame Cannon would be good. Maybe do one Mirror Image, one Arcane Blast, so like it shores up your early game a little bit more. And then I would double up on the Ethereal Conjurer because that card is awesome. And I would put in a
absolutely.
Nefarian. I know you probably don't have one, but if you
Oh,
now that's
duplicate.
a
Oh, he's a minion
that's
that
a
makes
minion that
spells.
summons
Yeah.
spells, right? So
And
yeah.
also, is he free to play? chances are he's doing adventures, so you get Nefarian from BlackRock.
Right.
Duplicates a spell that summons minions, right?
Oh, there you go. Duplicates a spell that creates minions. Absolutely.
Mad
and you've got
Scientist
some
is
good
a
ones in
minion
here
that
too.
summons spells.
And I also think like rather than mech yetis, you're going to do better. I think with things like Azure Drake. I know it's 5 costs instead of 4, but when you're running a bunch of spells and then you get spell power and you draw a card, hey, maybe it draws you a spell. So it's a minion who created a spell.
Or worst case scenario, minion that created a minion. That's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I think Azure Drake or Piloted Shredder is better than the Mechanical Yeti there. If while hearing our voice you crack an Antonitis, stick with it maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Mirror Entity is another one. It's a spell that summons a minion.
Yeah.
Yep, there you go. And also whatchamacallit, the one that gives you a random of the same cost. Secret. Effigy. There you
Yeah.
go.
Oh.
I would put a couple good secrets in here so that you can feel good about playing Mad Scientist, because then the secret he pulls will indeed be random.
Now, I want to get your take on this, Admirable. What are you one of the guys who goes 2 secrets, 2 mad scientists, and like 2 one-of secrets, and then just 2 mad scientists, trying not to draw the secrets?
It just kind of depends on which direction that you're willing to take. Like if you want to just be the guy who always has Mirror Entity, sure, run 2 Mirror Entities. But it just depends on what your goals are. Like, what does your deck actually need to do? So if you need to copy their minion, take advantage of the fact that you got that tempo swing, and then keep going, you probably want Mirror Entities. But if your goal is to kind of like maybe protect Flamewaker, or to play a little bit more of a card advantage game with your opponent, which if you have Ethereal Conjurers, I think you have a good chance of doing. Duplicate certainly fits the bill in a lot of those instances.
Yeah. It's funny, though, because over time, like you used to see all the tempo mages would run 2 mad scientists, and they'd run like 3 secrets. So you'd see 2 mirror entities and a counter spell or something like that. And over time, you've seen the secret, like the number of secrets in the deck being cut down and cut down. That's because when you have the mad scientist in your hand and then you draw the secret, it feels really, really bad. It's just like, oh, great. So now I have a 2/2 vanilla that does nothing.
Yeah. You want to deploy those guys as fast as possible.
Yeah, get them on the board. Get the secrets out of your deck for free. Yeah. But I think this guy's got a good baseline. I think he just needs to sacrifice his theme just a touch to go for just some stronger cards. And that'll just tighten things up a little bit more. But one of the things about Casino Mage I always really liked was when the RNG went against you, it was still possible to win. But when the RNG was with you, it was like you just steamrolled everybody in front of you.
It felt like cheating.
So, yeah. Yeah, like there were certain games where it was just like, yeah, I couldn't lose this game even if I fireball my own face at this point. I'm not going to lose this game because I just got so lucky over and over and over again. And then there are some games where you're just like, oh, cool, I got deadly poison off of my spell slinger, sweet, and that kind of stuff does happen. So,
well, when your opponent plays Blingtron, you're going to be really happy about that.
That happens all the time.
Yeah, all the time, right?
All right, any last words for Eric here?
Just for the love of God, put Piloted Shredder in this deck. Get rid of this.
What do you think, Admiral? Anything else for him?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Sacrifice a little bit of the theme to sort of tighten up the build. I think you tighten up the build a little bit, you'll be satisfied that your theme has more consistency. Sacrificing your theme doesn't necessarily mean that it's gone. It just means we need more support cards for it. So ideally, if you're supporting it better, you'll find your theme hitting its stride more often, even though you have less cards for it. So I think that's a really important thing for sort of like a deck building lesson for anyone out there. If you want to build your theme, you have to have support cards for it, not necessarily just cards that are within the theme.
I agree. I think a lot of times people go too far. Like I've seen a lot of people that give me like, oh, check out my Murloc list. I'm like, well, you got all the bad Murlocs in here. And like, I know that they say Murloc on them, but it doesn't just mean like chuck them all in. Like put
that
in
worked
the
in my
ones.
Murloc Shaman.
But it's like, did you go too far with your theme and then sacrifice your actual ability to win a game? Because it's fun to play a theme, and I trust me, I do it all the time. Like the Dills to Whatevs, it's all about playing crazy theme decks. But you also want to win because that is fun too. So at least give yourself a chance to win. I think is really the point I'm trying to make.
I think so too. Well, let's look at Dreadkern, is how I'm gonna choose to pronounce his name. Let's look at his Javelin Warrior.
Javelin Warrior.
Yeah,
okay.
and Dreadkern wrote, "Dear Malcontent Fowl, Javelin Warrior, it's pretty simple. Everything in the deck throws something or has an animation that makes it feel as though it does.
Okay.
I've tested a couple builds, and at 32 games in both ranked and casual, it has been staying at a 50% win rate. I would like you guys to take a stab at it and offer up your thoughts on what could make it stronger. Well, challenge accepted. Okay, so the whole vibe here is just to have things throw things.
I love it.
That's that is a stretch for a theme there, buddy.
Well, I mean, man, we had somebody on the show a long time ago who had made something like this with Rogue, where basically every minion did something, like threw damage out there when you played it.
Yeah, but I think he's literally talking about animations here because he has things like execute
Yeah.
and slam in here, and yeah, when I'm thinking about warrior animations, it does look like it's being thrown from your hero.
Yeah. Well, a Wrathy Weaponsmith isn't throwing anything, but okay.
Tosses that little blob, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it tosses you. It tosses
does
you a
it?
weapon.
I
It
feel like it
throws the
does.
weapon up to you. Is that what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah.
I feel like it does. I don't actually know.
It's been a while since I played that card.
Yeah.
I'm gonna load up Hearthstone right now and figure. I'm kidding.
I was
So
considering
okay.
doing that.
So looking at it, like, yeah, he's definitely fitting the theme of throwing things. But I think you could probably like tighten this up too. Like you could get rid of some of the things that are a little bit extraneous and just go more two-ofs that like of the stronger versions of things. Like Flame Juggler, I think you just have two of those instead of Huge Toad. Because I just think it's just better to do it the turn you play it, and it's usually better to have a 2/3 instead of a 3/2 in most cases these days. I don't know if you need the Archer. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think this deck just in general has a lot of one-ofs without Reno, so it's lacking consistency and also the payoff for not having consistency, which is the huge heal. So I think he needs to tighten it up and take out some of these. Yeah, a lot of these.
See, for me, I think about the Javelin Warrior, and at some point he's got to get in melee range, right? I mean, someone's gonna slip past the lines. You need your fiery war axes and your dust bites to fend those guys off.
Yeah.
When they get to that point, I mean, you got to have your sidearm available.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
about Flingtron? Because he tosses the weapons.
Well, he
doesn't
tosses a weapon to both guys.
Yeah.
Are you
Well, I
hoping
mean,
that
if you're going to run a Swamp Ooze, why not run a Blingtron too? Yeah.
and then you could
Get
also
that sweet synergy going.
you could also make the argument that if you get a bow, it's technically a ranged weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, we're really stretching here, guys.
Yeah.
Really
But see, okay,
stretching
if I were gonna do this too, I think what I would do is I would go straight out like damage essentially. Like I would say I'm gonna essentially try to aggro you down, right? So rather than having things like Frost Elemental or Sludge Belcher, things like that, I think even Mookless Champion, like I would double up on things like the Nightblade theme, and I would just be like, yeah, what we're doing is we're javelining your face every single turn with something. Right, and in that case, I would say, okay, double up on the Elven Archer, double up on the Flame Jugglers, give me the Knife Jugglers, like give me all the things that could potentially hit your face with projectiles, and we'll just do that, and we'll just and then while we're at it, let's put a Brand Bronzebeard in here, so I'm hitting you twice with all of those things, and
I do
then
like-
we're doubling up on our damage.
I do like the idea of Brandon here.
Sure, all of these are pretty much battle cries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Mukla's isn't. Belcher isn't.
Well, yeah, but you cut those, right?
Oh, okay.
Those. Yeah. You cut those and you just go straight, like everything goes at your face. Yeah, then you can start running things like Bash and whatchamacallit, the Mortal Strike. And you could just, just be like, yeah, I hit your face with my warrior. That's what I do. I throw things at your
I
face.
throw my warrior at your face.
Throw things at your face every turn.
Kor'kron Elite's kind of like a javelin. Like
There
the
you go.
4 is like
Yeah.
pointed, so
Oh.
when the 4 goes up and it hits him,
Yeah.
it's like a javelin, right?
Very
It's sick. I
stabby.
throw this Kor'kron Elite at your face. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. That seems, like that might work in some world.
He has
I feel
one.
like this has to have bouncing blade for board clear. Like, please.
That's just like a lot of javelins. All going off
Exactly.
the
That's just,
place.
it's
Sure.
hanging all over the place.
You have X-Slinger.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have Axe-Slinger. Exactly. That's a combo right there. You play double Axe-Slinger and Bouncing Blades, and you just hit their face for $1 million.
I feel like
You're going to
our
get a Thaurissan, though. You're going to get a
our-
Thaurissan in there.
Yeah.
Because that's 11 mana. But I don't know. I think, who was it? Purple did that, didn't he? Didn't Purple
Yeah.
make a deck did that?
X-Slinger, Rampage,
Yeah.
Bouncing
Bouncing
Blades.
Blades. Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah, and he actually got wins with it. But that's not everybody can do what he does.
Yeah, I
But
think you just need
I like the theme. I really like that. This is a fun theme in my mind. But I think just try to like go one direction with your theme. I think, and you'll probably do better.
Yeah,
I do like the idea of Bran with the double battle cries and all the face damage. I think that could be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Bran goes in here, and more weapon. You already have one Death Bite in here, so why not? Cut some of the inconsistency and throw in your Fiery War Axe and your Death Bites.
Yeah, double up on the Death Bite, double up on the War Axe.
Because there's not enough cards, period, to keep this thing. Like, you can't have 30 cards at all throw something, so why not make some of the ones that have to break the theme be really good? So
well, and Death Bite does still fit the theme, because when it breaks, then it has the knives flying everywhere.
It has a whirlwind effect, which I would argue is not really. It doesn't look like anything's being thrown. So
depends on how you look at it.
Yeah,
I'm going back to the argument of you got to have support cards for your theme.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can't get to your some of your javelin cards if you don't have ways to live that long.
Yep.
Weapons are going to help you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Think about it like Daryl from The Walking Dead. Sometimes he has to smash you in the side of the face with his he's not always shooting straight through the head from long distance.
I thought you were
Sometimes he's blowing things up with a friggin' never
Stop.
mind.
That's where you were going with that. I thought you were going to say sometimes he just has to look at you all dreamy like through his greasy long hair.
Exactly.
He's super dreamy.
Wonderful. Well, before we move into emails, let's thank Squarespace.com for sponsoring this episode of The Angry Chicken. You can go to Squarespace.com right now, build yourself an awesome website, and at checkout, if you use the code TAC, you'll get 10% off your first order. So we thank them for sponsoring it. I use it for everything I do. Check out Squarespace.com.
I also use it for everything I do. I used it for breakfast this morning, lunch. I'm going to use it for dinner. Squarespace. That's all I got.
Squarespace feeds dills, apparently, is the hashtag for this week.
I'm so used to those stories going on for like 5 minutes.
No, I mean, it's
Didn't
fine.
wanna cut you off?
I go down to my local Squarespace and I pick up some barbecue for dinner.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to that this evening.
I didn't know Squarespace had brick and mortar locations. I'll have to go check those out.
Totally. Great
Wonderful.
brisket.
Great.
Brisket.
Squarespace has everything, Garrett. Have you not learned that by now?
Apparently. Well, let's take an email or two.
Hello?
Hello, it's me.
Hello?
Just quickly, do you get my message?
Yep.
Oh,
Hello, brother.
You can send your emails to tacpodcast@gmail.com. Our first email today comes to us from Random Drake, who says, "Hello, Angry Fowl. I just wanted to chime in really quick and offer a bit of insight from the technical side of things that may help to answer a question brought up in the latest episode. You were looking for reasons why Blizzard would close down old adventures and make them no longer accessible. One very easy explanation is this. Just like an overwhelming number of historical cards make it difficult to progress forward with new features or card rules, leaving behind old code and old adventures means that every single new card, rules, or play mode has to be 100% compatible with these old adventures. That means every card needs to be tested against every boss and situation to be sure nothing crashes, or you end up in situations that somehow break the particular adventure. By removing old adventures, this frees up 1. Time for developers on iteration, not having to test all of the new cards against the old adventures. 2, lets new awesome cards be developed that would have otherwise broken a boss battle in one of those old adventures. Anyway, just throwing that out there as a possibility. I just had a daughter and was finally able to get back to the Angry Chicken, and it was a great episode as always. Keep up the good work." Holy crap, Random Drake! Congratulations, you've procreated. Should have called yourself Procreating Drake. But as to your email. I think this is completely busted because it's not like we're losing the adventures because we already have it, and they haven't said that we're not going to be able to enter the adventures with new cards.
Yeah.
No,
you
that's
still will
true,
be able
but
to
I think
enter them.
I think the expectation, though, is with players who have had access, who have already purchased the adventures, they've probably already played them through. If for some reason there is some sort of a game-breaking bug, it's not that big of a deal versus a new player who might purchase that and hit a game-breaking bug. Like, they're kind of like, it'll be a very, very rare case that they'll have to deal with. And then they can just say, well, yeah, we didn't test for that. That's a game-breaking bug. Like, don't do it again. Why are you playing old content? Versus, like, if it's available for everyone all the time.
It is an edge case, but I don't know. I just get the feeling that it's more of a thematic change more than one of technicalities. I think it's just these are old cards. They feel like old cards. These are old adventures. They feel like old adventures. No longer being printed. It's digital, so printed is in quotations, but just to give cards that feel right. And Admirable, you played Magic, like old cards being you were talking about at the beginning of the show, the legacy and the reason people want these cards and they go up in value is because they are so fun to play. If these cards are just kind of readily available, they don't feel quite as, I think, aged and special. And I think that might be more of a reason why we see this change.
So I've thought about this a lot, and I feel like I'm one of the only people who's for the cycling this out of the store. You're still going to be able to craft these cards. Once they're gone, they have to have availability. You can just make them as you want. Of course, Shade Extramas costs 1,600 dust then. Sucks. I mean, if you want to get into older formats, you're probably going to have to pay a price for that. But there's two things that happen here. Number one, the players who spent the time playing during this era and bought this content and have consumed it and are going to consume new content are now rewarded for having supported the game for that long. You have this forever. This is your reward for it. It's now exclusive to you. Exclusivity means something. Like, to me, I like exclusivity in things because it means that you had to be involved to participate in it. And I'm sorry if that cuts out other people, but being a hardcore gamer like I am, I really like to have stuff that other people can't have. For instance, when I was raiding back at level 60 World of Warcraft, I liked having stuff from AQ40 that other people didn't have. And was that unfair? I don't know. Maybe it was, but you know what? I put in the work for it, and I got my reward as a result of it. This isn't quite the same example. It's a little different of a parallel, but the fact that we've all played this content and consumed it, we have that little bit of extra reward. You get to keep this adventure. You get to play through it. I have never played through an adventure again after having them. I would venture to say that none of the professionals that I know have played through adventures again, unless they bought them on new servers or something like that. But the fact that this is very did. The fact that this is getting rotated out of the store, I really don't feel like it's that big of a deal. Like, if you haven't bought an Extramas yet, like, are you a serious player? Are you a competitive player? Do you intend to break through into the scene and have the necessity to have all these cards in order to play the game? I think the answer is no. And so if you want to get these cards, it may take you a little bit extra time. It may take you more money at the end of the day, but you could just buy it right now for $25. That's $5 Starbucks you sacrifice to have an Extramas. Like that's not really like too big of a deal to me. And then this guy making the argument about freeing up time for developers and all that sort of stuff, I don't really necessarily think that he is on point with his hypothesis here, but he brings up an interesting point, which is a lot of work has to be done to keep all this stuff in the store and to make sure that all of this, who's to say that their payment processors don't get bogged down by having just too many different options available, et cetera, et cetera. I don't really know how all this bullshit works because it's all Magic as far as I'm concerned. But the point being is that there's a lot of work that goes into the back end of these things, and I think people really underestimate how much work is involved in that. Like, just having worked on productions in studios before, there is way more stuff involved than I ever thought there was going to be. And so now imagine, instead of just setting up a studio and camera and lights, you are quite literally hand by hand typing in code to create something that then goes to some sort of director who has to approve this, say it's okay, go through quality control, go to an art guy to make sure his art matches up with what your code is, incorporate his art into the code, send that over to the guy who's in charge of the whole project. He has to sign off on the whole thing when we figured out how the whole thing worked. Like, tons and tons of work goes into maintaining a lot of this stuff. And so I think it's kind of like a twofold process where, like, number one, this does save them a lot of time and effort, and number two, it also rewards people who have been supporting the game for years and years.
Well said.
See, I'm on that. I'm in your camp on that one as well. I mean, I said that I like this change because I want those cards to feel special. I want them to feel like something you kind of have to go out and get. At a certain point, there will be like a lot of these cards, obviously. So to go out and get all of them is a big undertaking. But at the same time, it's not necessarily less accessible because, let's say, I need 2 mad scientists for wild. I just go out and I spend 80 dust and I have 2 of them, rather than going out and spending $25 or 2,800 gold or whatever it is to like buy all the wings. Right? It's like I just go out and pick and choose the cards I need, and I go out and get them, and I have them now. And sometimes it's a legendary, and it's 1,600, but sometimes it's a common, and it's really cheap.
Not only that, but it's a collectible card game. Mm-hmm. If everyone has everything forever, that's not very collectible to me. I have collected everything. That's my collection. Like, that's
I did it. It was hard.
I chose not
true.
to buy a used car instead.
Damn it, I should be rewarded for that. I agree. We got one from Cramsey who says, "Hello, TAC. I agree that standard was needed for the longevity of Hearthstone, but do you also see them using this as an opportunity to fix some of the game-winning RNG for the competitive scene? Examples would be Unstable Portal, both Dr. Boom, bots hitting for 4, and even Crackle hitting for max damage. I believe RNG is needed in Hearthstone is what makes each game fun and unique, but some of these cards seem to have too much of an impact and swings on a game, depending on what was rolled. Keep up the great show." Well, I don't believe that we're not going to see more RNG effects, if that's what Cramsey is thinking. I think that's kind of now at this point a staple of what Hearthstone does and what Hearthstone can do. That games like Paper Magic, there's very few things that are random in Magic. Sometimes there's things like turn your hand upside down and pick one and discard it at random. There's very few of those effects though, because they are a little bit
I just
tough
pictured
to
you
pull
like
off.
still looking at your cards, but just like turning your hand upside down.
Oh yeah,
and I was
just turn
like,
them upside down. Yeah,
how is that different?
yeah. All right, now you can't read them. All right, pick one at random. No, but in Magic, there's very few of these effects because it's there's things like flipping a coin, and there's some stuff like that that happens here and there, but it's not very common. Most of them are kind of for fun type of things. For the most part, everything is very cut and dried. Everything happens. But there's randomness in what you draw and the land you draw and how you're able to manipulate things like that. Whereas Hearthstone doesn't have that, so we have all these other effects that make all the games feel different. I think it's important, and I don't think we're going to see that go away. Case in point, Ragnaros, not going anywhere. 8 damage somewhere is still around and still in the
Pretty
game.
swingy, yeah.
And that's a very swingy piece of RNG. I would love to hear Admirable's thoughts on this, though, because someone who casts a lot of top-end competitive games. What is your take on randomness? Do you think this is something that they want to get rid of?
Well, obviously not. I mean, this, like you said, it's pretty core to Hearthstone. The fact that there's no variation in like mana base, that the deck lists are so much smaller, that it's a more linear style of play in terms of moving up the curve. All of those things take away from random, and so that's not necessarily a bad thing. But not having any random in the game certainly would be like a pretty bad thing in my opinion. But there's two different kinds of random, where there's like good random and bad random, in my opinion. And to me, I feel like the bad random is stuff that too heavily impacts the board without having a high cost involved with it. So like Knife Juggler, for instance. I think Knife Juggler is a fine kind of random because a lot of investment comes into making Knife Juggler happen, which is sometimes setting up your board position, oftentimes impacting the entire deck that you've built to be more focused on cheaper minions. The damage as it gets sorted out, sometimes it can win you the game, but sometimes it will lose you the game also. But not necessarily in such an impactful way that you're like, I hope this Knife Juggler hits. If it does hit, I win. If it doesn't hit, I lose. Those situations, I think, come up a lot less often than people like to lead on to. But Boombots, for instance, sometimes they kill Azure Drakes. And to me, that's like a little bit much. You're like, wow, really? This guy's Battlecry killed an Azure Drake. He's still got a 7/7, and he's got another thing out that I have to account for. That's a lot to account for. I think Crackle's totally fine. It averages out at 4.5 damage for 2 mana and then 1 next turn. I think it's a totally fine card. At the end of the year, you see the same exact results that you would have normally seen. It doesn't really impact games too much. I think most of the time people account for Crackle being 3 to 4 damage anyway when they're actually playing with it. And then cards like Piloted Shredder, I think, are very poor examples of random because they're so directly impactful to the board. In fact, it's almost impactful to the board. It's like no bearing on hand. The second body, as far as you're concerned, is almost completely expendable. There's not really a lot of things you can do to play with Piloted Shredder. It's sort of like, let's see what we get. Like, if your Shredder trades into my Shredder, this evens out, but it takes so many more games to even out than anything else ever would have. So, like, Ragnaros, for instance, kind of preaching against the opposite, where it's very heavily impacting the board on its random effect. But, again, it comes with a very high cost. Not only is this an 8-cost card in your hand, but it's also vulnerable to spells. It can't attack on its own. It is kind of like a thing that sits there, and if your opponent doesn't answer it, it has inevitability. It's not so much on like the relying on the effect. Sometimes you do have to rely on the effect. But I think that makes those games kind of exciting personally when you're like, well, let's hope this Ragnaros goes right, and we'll see what happens. But I'd like to see them move away from random that too heavily impacts the board and more towards random in the vein of like Discover, or I think Unstable Portal is totally fine. Like even if Ethereal Conjurer just gave you like a random Spell Slinger, I think is totally fine. that sort of stuff. That like adds a level to the game that you didn't quite have before and that you can't quite do in physical card games. But stuff like Piloted Shredder, I think they were on the right track with this. Like this dropped like one of 3 different Goblin pilots. I think it would have been okay.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
the
across
way
the
that's
board is a
too
little
wide
Yeah.
and it just does so much, I think that's the kind of stuff I want to see them get away from.
From Doomsayer to a 4/4, popping out of a 4/3 is kind of nuts, right?
Yeah, it's just a little bit too much at times.
Sure. I love things though, like you're right. I love the discover mechanic. I love the randomness that comes along with the choice to be made, and then even things like Ram Wrangler, I think is really cool because it's like, well, let's see what we get, and sometimes it's like amazing and it does some cool stuff.
Right, and there's
but you
there's
get a really
trigger
weak
there,
body
right?
for a high cost, right? So it's fine.
Right, and there's a trigger. You have to have a specific board state for that to happen. It's not like the piloted shredders where you just slap it
You
down
just
and
chuck
like,
it on the floor.
cool, I'm ahead, guys. I'm ahead.
There's nothing rewarding about getting a good Piloted Shredder drop. There's something that feels very rewarding when you've actively made the decision to rely on your Ragnaros rather than try to fight through your opponent's board decision. There's some sort of rewarding feeling when you've set up the perfect amount of juggles that you could get. Even if you failed on it, you're like, well, I did the best I could, and in the end of the day, it didn't work out. There's something that feels kind of rewarding about unstable portaling a minion and holding on to it till the right time. To me, there's not really anything rewarding about seeing a Ysera drop out of a Sneasel Shredder.
Yeah.
Or seeing a Nat Pagel chop out of it, for that matter, or a Finley, or Bolvar, or whatever it's going to be. Like, stuff that too heavily impacts the board without any sort of decision, bad in my opinion.
Sure.
Well said. Joss, you want to take the final email?
Yeah, the last email comes to us from Michael from New York, which I think he wanted because Michael's just such a common name. So
He's the only Michael in New York.
New York. Says, greetings. I want to start off by saying I understand why formats need to exist in a growing card game. That being said, I feel much of the disappointment with Wild has been mistakenly dismissed as with Wild is exactly what we have now. You're not losing anything. Standard does not affect Wild in any way. While I agree that we're not losing cards and Wild is not a dead format, the tragedy of Wild is the loss of human capital, the competitive and innovative players. Firebat, Stripecrow, Purple Clento Dog, Tice, etc. have no incentive to play Wild without large prize pool tournaments, which seems unlikely, and I think the format will suffer for it. Without those creative and competitive minds engaging in the format every day, I feel Wild ladder will stagnate much more easily than ladder does now. One of the main examples of why formats are needed is how little TGT changed the meta upon release because 1, decks are very refined, and 2, the expansion is a small injection of cards compared to the full card pool. And this is the problem that only worsens as more sets come out. As I said, I understand why formats are necessary, but I think it's unfair to dismiss criticism of Wild as simply not understanding the changes. Love the show. Keep up the great work. I kind of agree with this and didn't really think of really his second point here, saying that each expansion is such a small injection of cards compared to the full card pool. Because we have talked about how it's stagnating. So I don't know. We could see some really cool combos, but it could also stagnate really quickly. And as you guys are, I'm going to totally toss this to you because you guys are the Magic players. And so you have a little bit of experience with formats of using cards that have been available for 20 plus years. Like, what do you guys think about how it might actually stagnate without the kind of pro innovative deck building players?
I don't necessarily think we're not going to see pros playing Wild. This is one of the biggest things I think everyone is jumping the gun on more than anything else. It hasn't happened yet, so we don't know. Just because they came out and said that Standard is going to be the format for the HWC does not mean there will not be a competitive scene, that there will not be tournaments for Wild.
Yeah, there will be.
Yeah,
there will be, because it's an interesting format. It's going to get more interesting as time goes on. That being said, yes, a lot of pros will probably devote most of their time, at least during the Hearthstone World Championship season, to Standard, because that's where they're trying to compete, right?
Right.
And I think it's pretty good fortune that we have someone who is trying to compete for the Hearthstone World Championship right now, who could give us their take on it. But I really foresee tournaments with, five-figure prize pools running the Wild format, because it is going to be a really interesting format once everything's kind of shaken out. Maybe not initially, because Standard will be kind of the new, it's like that's the new hot thing. But as the format gets a little bit more venerable and things change more and more, and there's stuff that hasn't been explored in Wild, I think we will start to see a lot of Wild tournaments that are big prize pools and really, really good players.
That's true. They could be really exciting to watch because of all the big crazy combos. So you could see a lot more advertisers going to Wild tournament formats just because it's like, well, the viewers are going to want to see all the crazy, crazy things that can happen.
And there will be specialists as well, I think, Wild specialists, people who really, really kind of take to Wild more than they take to the standard format. But I'd love to hear what you have to think about this, Nathan.
All right, so I'm just going to ask some questions about his points that he made. So mentioning that players like Firebat, Strife Crow, Purple, Calento, Dog, Tice, etc. have no incentive to play Wild without large prize pool tournaments, which seems unlikely. Why does it seem unlikely? That is my first question for it, is because as far as we can tell, any Hearthstone tournament that's going to draw views is what's likely to happen. I think the sealed deck thing was kind of unlikely too, but it happened. I think that Lord of the Arena was really unlikely, but we saw that happen too. The community source stuff is a big part of that.
And the Archon thing coming up this weekend, another, I think at this point, people were hungry for new formats and were making them on their own.
Correct.
So
and
I don't see why it's unlikely to have Wild be a thing.
So then my big question here is, what incentive did these guys have to play before they played in tournaments? Which is the love of the game.
They found it fun.
Yeah. That's why you
Wait,
play
Hearthstone's
games.
supposed
You
to be
love them.
fun? What?
So for me, I look at this situation and I go, sure, Wild off the bat is not going to be a spectacle. I don't think there's any question about that. It's going to be Hearthstone plus the new set. But say a year from now, say 2 years from now, say 3 years from now, what was the last time you would have seen someone use Naxxramas cards or seen someone use BlackRock cards? The other thing that happened too is when they print new sets and they don't have to think about a card necessarily being balanced in like say you print a card specifically for Wild in the new set, they're free to do that now because they don't have to worry about how that card has implications on what the standard format would do because it was specifically designed to impact Wild. You can do a lot of different stuff with your design space when you have different formats. Magic does this all the time. Like they print cards where you read it and you go, what the heck is this card supposed to do? Then you go read the vintage forums, and people have come up with all these crazy turn 2 kill decks.
Infinite combos with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And while I don't anticipate infinite combos working their way into the game, I do anticipate some more powerful stuff being able to come up with in Wild. Like me personally, Wild is the format that I'm looking forward to the most. I'm really going to love Standard because I like competing and stuff. But I really like being Specialist too. And so with something like Wild, since I've been in the game since the very beginning, and since I have such a long history playing cards in general, I feel like I have a very good idea of when I see cards, how to apply them to those wide card pools and what it really means to create sort of combinations within decks that end up being very powerful for something that's kind of seemingly just another card. And 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, 10 years down the line, Wild is by far going to be my favorite format. I'm going to have a full collection of everything, and there are going to be people who want to watch that simply because they literally just don't have those cards. I think that's a large part of the appeal why people watch Hearthstone in general, is because you watch professionals play, they have everything available to them, and someone's playing like, man, I wish I had all those cards. That's really cool that you can build those decks and play those decks. Like, to me, that feels like a very significant portion of the viewership. Think about when Wild is happening in 5 years. You're like, crap, that guy's got everything. He's got every single card I could possibly imagine. And the people who are Wild specialists, they're going to have gold stuff of that too.
Yeah.
Like, these guys, the reason you play the game is because you love the game. If something wants to draw viewership, it'll draw viewership because that's what the community wants to see. If nobody wants to see Wild, sure, we may see Wild kind of shrivel up and kind of crawl into its little hole, and no one really ends up caring about it except for a small group of people. I don't anticipate that being the case. I think people are going to be very happy to have different options available to them. Say you just get sick of Standard because you just don't really like the theme that much. Go play Wild. I'm certain you'll have a lot of fun. It's still Hearthstone at the end of the day.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I also think that it's really cool because right now the only separation you really have, like when you mentioned the design stuff, is you have Arena and then you have Constructed, right? And so like a card like Kraken's like, oh my god, so good in Arena, totally crap in Constructed. But now like that might be really good in some crazy Wild deck in the future that would have never made its way into any Constructed thing at all. So you're going to see, like now you evaluate cards and you're going to go, okay, how good is this in Wild? How good is this in Standard? How good is this in Arena? There's just so much more to talk about and think about. And to anybody who really enjoys Hearthstone, like how are you not excited about having more and more to think and talk about and like figure out and all that kind of stuff? That to me is like some of the best fun you have in this game, is just thinking about the crazy things you can do, and it just opens up all kinds of possibilities. I understand that some people are a little bit wary, but I hope those people just give it a chance and see where we are now in a year, and how much healthier we'll be as a game and a community because of this, this division.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think concern is unwarranted. I think it's very warranted, but I think give it.
Oh, sure. No, I'm not saying it's unwarranted. I understand the concern. I'm just saying give it a chance, because I think over time people are going to realize that this was a good move, and it happened at the right time, I think, too.
Well, and I think the other thing that people who are so critical of Wild, I think the thing that they're missing was Brode made a statement, and I can't remember which interview it was in. I think it was in the PC Gamer one, basically saying, like, if Wild sucks, we are open to changing it. So that's one of the advantages that we have, given that we live in
I think that's a direct quote, actually.
Yeah.
If Wild sucks.
I do my best to quote him properly. But yeah, I think like a lot of people are missing that because we live in a digital card space, we can make changes that you aren't as easy in a physical card space. So the fact that the team is like, yeah, we're going to listen to feedback, and if we see the numbers and they say no one's playing Wild, then we'll either change it or get rid of it. Like, they're open to the community and what they think and what the community wants to play. So just chill and see what happens. Just chill, guys. Just chill.
Yeah, trust in the Brode.
Yeah, trust
Brode's got
in
your back.
Blizzard. Trust in Team 5.
There are people on this earth that love Hearthstone that when you say trust in the Brode probably sends them into a fit of rage. And I'm not friends with those people.
Sorry.
I don't get along with those people. I don't get along
More
with
fun on this side.
Our grass is nicer on the side of the fence. Well, wonderful.
Full of rage.
Thank you for your emails, everyone. That's going to more or less do it for this episode. Thanks again to our patrons over at patreon.com/TAC. Also, thank you for your 5-star iTunes reviews. If you listen to us on iTunes, drop us a review. This episode, we wanted to thank Bellwether, Brewdon, The Blue King, Frosted Steel, and Anukashuk, who said, I don't even really like Hearthstone, but I love these guys. Kind of.
Wow.
So,
well, thank you.
Thank you for the...
Inukshuk. It's a Canadian thing.
Oh, well.
Ah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I
Sorry.
Didn't know that. Yeah, sorry about that, Jocelyn.
It's all right.
I didn't know what I was talking about.
Oh,
Yep. Yeah, I went there. Sorry. Admirable, you are our guest today, so you get the first round of pimpage. Where can folks find you when you're not hanging out with us?
Well, of course, all my social media stuff is going to be ThatsAdmirable, twitter.com/ThatsAdmirable, twitch.tv/ThatsAdmirable, youtube.com/ThatsAdmirable. I think it's how you type it out. And Facebook is ThatsAdmirable as well. I stream.
Where did the name come from, by the way?
Okay, so so I'm guessing you guys have all watched Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Season 1 in Game of Thrones, when I think it's Samwell and Jon Snow are like goofing off in like the mess hall, and they're like cleaning tables and like talking about stuff, and they're not really doing their job as hard as they should be. And then Alistair Thorne walks in, and they get super serious. And Alistair Thorne's like kind of giving them the talking to, and he's being like really, really over the top dramatic. And he looks at Jon Snow and he goes, "Was it uncomfortable in Winterfell? Were the days you just couldn't get warm, never mind how many fires your servants built?" And Jon Snow just looks at him and he goes, "I build my own fires." And Alistair Thorne immediately just goes, "That's admirable." And he looks at him like, you freaking idiot. Like, yeah, congratulations, you built your own fires. I fought wars in the freezing cold where if we took our gloves off, our hands froze off. Congratulations, you built your own fires. Like, that was like his attitude towards it. And I remember seeing that scene, and I just started laughing. And everyone else who was watching with me was like, "What's so funny?" And I'm like, "That's funny. That's really funny." And that's really that's where it came from.
All right, nice.
My God, dude, you are my kind of nerd. That was my favorite thing, I think, this whole
Kappa
episode. That is amazing. Great. Well, folks, follow That's Admirable anywhere you can think of.
And everywhere. Yeah.
With That's Admirable. So, Jocelyn, how about you? Where can folks find you?
Right here on AMove TV every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. for the Gamers In, and you can follow me on Twitter and Twitch at Joss Plays.
Dills?
You can catch me on Stormcast on Mondays, catch me on The Instance on Fridays, and Torturecast will be coming back fairly soon. We're going to have our big 100th episode. We've been doing like 99.1, then 99.2, because we want the big 100th episode to be, like the season preview, and we have a bunch of guests on stuff. So that'll be happening at some point. Although we did just have a whole bunch of interviews with Giants players go up, and Veronica Belmont helped us out. She went to Media Day with Chad, and they interviewed like Hunter Pence and everybody. It was amazing. I wasn't there, That sucked for me. But at least they were there, and that was cool. And then, of course, twitch.tv/WillieDillsSF. And I think on Saturday, Garrett, me and you are going to be doing something together.
We are.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing the Heroes.
Into the Nexus, the Core. And who else is coming?
Pretty much everyone. HeroesCharityBrawl.com, everyone.
Yes.
We're going to be playing Heroes of the Storm to raise money for...
First Wish.
Make a wish. Make a wish. Make a wish.
Make a wish.
Clearly, this is not something that
I'm not John Cena, okay? I don't know. Yeah. This is my first wish made. But, yeah, so we've already got, I think, $500 out of the $1,000 goal. So, yeah, check out, what was the website? Heroes Charity Brawl?
HeroesCharityBrawl.com. We'll be streaming this Saturday. Go there for info. A ton of Heroes of the Storm podcasts coming together and just trying to beat the crap out of each other digitally for a good cause. So,
and we're going to be playing weird formats like reverse draft and all kinds of cool, crazy stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
And Twitter @WillieDills. There you go.
Check that out. You can find The Angry Chicken and all of the other podcasts over at amove.tv. Thanks to our Patreon producers, Declan H and LVE. Get our coffee mugs, pint glasses, and that jazz at bit.ly/amovestore. Get our t-shirt on slashloot.com. Follow the show at TAC Podcast. You can follow me personally at Garrett Art. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again to squarespace.com. And until the next time we talk to you, which may be the Brawl episode if it's not a repeat Brawl this week, may just be next Tuesday, job's done.
Job's done.
Job's done.
Yes!
Job's done.